All right, Tim, looks like everybody's here and we have started recording.
All right, thank you, Sierra. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Sullivan. I'm an NPL at USDA NIFA. Before we get going, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join with us today. We are very excited to introduce this new collaborative opportunity. And we are going to be recording the webinar because I know we set this up on a relatively short timetable. The hope by the end of our short webinar today is that we can give you kind of a primer of the scope of this collaboration between NIFA and APHIS. But I think more importantly than that is really to just make sure everyone knows who the contacts are for these various programs so that if you have questions, you know who to reach out to. I think we're also going to have time for questions at the end after we talk about the various programs for people. So with that, I'll get going. Next slide, Sierra. Thank you. So this is the USDA non-discrimination statement. So I'm just going to give a few seconds for people to view this. At the top, there's a link to the statement itself. And in the third bullet, there is information about how to file a complaint if for any reason you were to feel like there was discrimination within the meeting today. So at this point, I'm actually going to turn over the microphone to Dr. Langston Hull of USDA APHIS, who's going to talk a little bit about the sort of the confines of the collaboration and also the priorities for USDA APHIS as it relates to these funding opportunities. Dr. Hull?
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. Next slide. Okay, so the confines of the APHIS Afri SARS-CoV-2 collaboration. USDA NIFA and USDA APHIS have agreed to collaborate on several Afri program priority areas. Through funding provided by the American Rescue Plan Act, USDA APHIS will contribute up to $15 million across all three Afri program areas and up to $9 million for the EEID program. These will be in addition to the funding provided by USDA NIFA. Projects must be within the scope of the respective Afri program areas while aligning with the SARS-CoV-2 research needs of USDA APHIS. Next slide, please. The objectives of the APHIS Afri SARS-CoV-2 collaboration, as you can see here, I'll read through. Number one, address gaps in surveillance and investigation activities for SARS-CoV-2 in animals, including farmed animals, captive wildlife, free-ranging wildlife, and companion animals. The second, to expand knowledge of susceptibility of species to SARS-CoV-2 to improve understanding of potential roles or routes of transmission. Three, develop surveillance tools and strategies for the rapid detection and characterization of emerging and re-emerging pathogens to support an early warning system to prevent or limit future SARS-CoV-2 outbreaks. And finally, four, identify risks, effective interventions, and other measures to prevent SARS-CoV-2 transmission at the human-animal interface and or impacts to the food supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. So what we're going to do now is go through the 4 programs within Afri that are relevant to this funding opportunity. So there's going to be a different national program leader who's going to present each program. They're going to introduce themselves and then talk about the priorities of that program so that we all kind of have an understanding of where SARS-CoV-2 fits within the scope of the current program priority. So for the first one, I'll turn it over to Kathy Bjork.
Thanks, Tim. So Tim and I are the national program leaders for Afri A1221, Diseases of Agricultural Animals. You can see the submission deadline is August 11th of this year, 2022. And my contact information and Tim's contact information, our emails are there. So looking at the priorities, they are cellular, molecular, genomic, genetic, or whole animal aspects of animal health and disease, emphasizing maintaining healthy agricultural animals for a safe and adequate food supply, maintenance of homeostasis, including innate immune responses, disease prevention and control, including vaccines, reverse vaccinology, breeding for resistance, management, and diagnostics, therapeutic interventions for disease reduction or treatment, and this includes minor use animal drugs, immune reagents for agricultural animals, and then the establishment of a research coordination network for minor use drugs. I'll hand it back to you, Tim. Thanks.
Oh, I think you can go. I think the next person is Angelica. Yep, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angelica Van Gor, and I'm a national program leader at NIFA. I am the primary NPL on this program, but it's also co-managed by Ganesh Bora and Andre Sibbles. So in A1261, which is interdisciplinary engagement in animal systems, we call it IDEAs, this program priority area seeks to bridge traditional disciplinary divides and address complex issues in animal agriculture. So this requires new interdisciplinary work that's anchored in animal and veterinary medical sciences to support food and agriculture production. I do want to note here that when we're talking about interdisciplinary, we're really looking for bringing groups of life scientists, physical scientists, and social scientists together to address our priorities. So we have three main priorities in this program. The first is precision animal management, which includes developing climate smart methods to enhance animal production and increase productivity, which may include the use of spatial and temporal resources, resource smart feeding and monitoring, breeding and management to address animal health and animal products. The second is environmental synergies of animal production. So this focuses on managing emissions into the atmosphere, recycling, reusing co-products of animal agriculture. For example, improving our manure management strategies for efficient nutrient use. And thirdly, the priority area is societal aspects of animal welfare. So identifying and resolving factors that influence building trust around animal agriculture across diverse communities, so such as consumers and producers, to improve animal welfare. Our application submission deadline is a little bit later than what Kathy talked about for her program. Ours is October 6th. And I do want to note that this program is an integrated program, so it needs to include research, education, and/or extension projects, and they're up to $1 million in funding. Thank you.
So go ahead, Michelle.
All right, thanks, Tim. So I'm Michelle Colby. I'm the National Program Leader for Animal Biosecurity. And on the animal health side, I'm the lead for the Agricultural Biosecurity Program Area Priority. So this program area priority focuses on increasing the U.S. national capacity to prevent and rapidly detect and respond to biological threats to U.S. agriculture and the food supply. The supported activities we're looking at things that are aimed at increasing agricultural biosecurity at the regional and national levels and across public and private sectors. The two main priority areas under this are detection and diagnostics of transboundary emerging or re-emerging pests and diseases associated with animal production systems, and/or transboundary emerging, re-emerging, and invasive diseases, insects, and weeds associated with plant production systems. Obviously, for this webinar, the animal side is more relevant, but also rapid response to and recovery from pests and diseases that pose large-scale biosecurity threats to plant and animal production, including existing and imminent threats to U.S. agricultural production and food supply systems. Angelica mentioned that IDEAS is focused on integrated projects. Ag Biosecurity accepts both research and integrated proposals. So the upper limit for proposals is $1 million. The research proposals are slightly lower at 700,000, I believe, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, with a possibility of an additional 150,000 if you're partnering with certain institutions.
So it's 650,000 for single function research and then 1 million for integrated.
Thanks, Tim.
No worries.
And our application submission deadline is October 20th.
Oh, hi, it's me again, Tim Sullivan. I'm going to talk now about the program with the latest submission deadline, the Ecology and Evolution of Infectious Disease program. So NIFA's participation in EEID is funded through Afri, but this is what we call an interagency program. So EEID is managed primarily by the National Science Foundation. The other partners, other than USDA NIFA, are the National Institutes of Health, the U.S. Israeli Binational Science Foundation, National Science Foundation of China, and UKRI. So EEID is a program that focuses on ecological, evolutionary, and social drivers of emerging infectious diseases. So a central theme of any submission to this program is quantitative or computational understandings of host-pathogen systems. So it can be understanding virulence, resistance, transmission, the evolution of new variants. All of those types of questions are captured in this program. And we focus on a whole range of pathogens and systems. So zoonotic, environmentally born, vector-borne, or enteric pathogens of terrestrial systems, aquatic systems, and terrestrial and aquatic organisms, including diseases of animals and plants. And and we go from specific pathogens, so a focus on a particular virus, in this case, say SARS-CoV-2, all the way to microbiomes and whole systems approaches and quantifying those. So for the purposes of the APHIS priorities that Dr. Hull talked about, many of those, understanding and quantifying evolution of SARS variants or transmission between wildlife and humans, or wildlife and agricultural animals, or companion animals, as I mentioned, would all be appropriate for EEID as it's drawn up. It's a very broad program. So I serve as NIFA's contact. And there are also folks, if you look at EEID on the internet at NSF, who also serve as the primary contacts. So anyone who has questions about program fit can obviously direct those to me. And I will give you my best and also connect you with the folks at NSF. That way, if you end up with specific submission questions later down the road, you have contacts there at NSF because they manage the submission process itself. So that is the final slide as far as programs go. So now I think we'll open it up. If anyone has specific questions you would like to direct to the group, we will try to give you our best answers. Don't be shy.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Doug.
When you mention the budget, is this per year or is this the total amount when you say 700,000 or a million?
Yeah, so each of these Afri programs has a little bit different budget. So when the speakers were talking about $650,000 or $1 million, those are for the life of the award. So the maximum request for an integrated project is $1 million for a project that lasts up to 5 years. For EEID, you can request up to 5 years as far as a project goes, and the request can be up to $3 million.
That's the maximum amount for the 3 year for the EEID, huh? So I'm a little confused on why NSF, why all these other agencies are involved. How do they enter, or what role do they play?
Yeah, so EEID is like a relatively large program. So when we do the panel, there are projects that are submitted that range from agricultural animals all the way through humans. NIH usually funds the human projects. NSF funds things that are a little more on the basic science side, and NIFA supports projects that are on the agriculturally relevant questions. So it's just a way for everyone to support projects that are all along the similar vein of kind of quantitative infectious disease. But as far as the SARS-CoV-2 part of this goes, it's really just going to be APHIS and NIFA supporting SARS relevant work that's submitted to EEID, which is a much bigger kind of program. Does that make sense?
Yes, but the application is all the same, right?
Yes.
And the other question I have is, I'm very interested. I'm an international researcher. I just finished a USAID project in Africa evaluating Rift Valley fever vaccine. Was thinking of trying to extend this project. I know USDA has a very keen interest in Rift Valley fever. But for SARS coronavirus 2, I'm looking at working with colleagues in Mexico. So for an international program or a project, who is the contact for that?
So I can give my best answer. So it depends on so I would direct your question to the contact for whichever program area priority best fits the work you're going to do. Some of them offer additional funds for international partnerships, and some programs in Afri don't, but it's really program specific. So if it's very animal health focused, you may reach out to Kathy and I, but if it's more on diagnostics, or if it fits better in ideas, you'll want to email Michelle or Angelica. That's the best advice I can give, is to just think about the scientific side of things and then put the question to whoever the contact would be for the program itself, and they'll give you the guidance.
Yeah, it's going to be the title is going to be Surveillance and Research on SARS coronavirus 2 and Domestic and Wild Animals in Southern Mexico.
Okay, so you might direct that probably to either Michelle or Kathy.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I think Suresh is up next. Go ahead, Suresh.
Thanks, Tim. I have a question regarding the SARS-CoV-2 specific funding. So is it my understanding that if we have a project that is relevant to SARS-CoV-2, so we choose one of the priority areas, either the 1221 or the 1181, and then follow the regular submission process and the timeline? Is that right?
Exactly. So yes. So in effect, we're sort of making the program area priorities open to SARS-CoV-2 projects that fit the APHIS priorities, what APHIS would like to see as far as SARS-CoV-2 work. But the submission requirements, we're going to follow everything that would normally be followed for an Afri submission.
Yeah, thank you. Just a follow-up question to that. Is there a specific code that we use, or just put it as we normally would do for the NIFA submission for, say, 1221, which is due in August?
I would follow the standard practice, since we're going to be treating those just like any other submission we get into those priority areas. Just do what the normal process for an AFRI submission.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think it's my turn, Tim.
Yep, fire away, Balaji.
Thanks very much, everyone. So I have a couple questions. The 1181 deadline. So there is a section on transboundary and emerging or re-emerging pathogens. Some of these ones could be pathogens that are of interest here in the US, but they're not that common. So take, for instance, if you have collaborators, say, in other parts of the world who are doing some work on African swine fever, would that be something that you would be interested in that regard to fit 1181? That's number one question. The other question has to do with the other question on EEID. The challenge with EEID has been that usually when you go to NIH, you say, I want my grants to go to NIGMS, you submit with a cover letter, they accept it. 1 week or 2 weeks later, somebody yanks it from there and send it to NIID where you don't want to be. So if we submit these grants to you guys, say we want this grant to be at USDA or to go to NSF, are we sure somebody's not going to yank it and send it to NIH?
So why don't we do that in two parts? Michelle can answer the first question, then I will try to answer the second question.
So I think in terms of emerging and re-emerging diseases, whether they're domestic or international, they're of interest to the A1181 program. I think you just need to be really careful that the NIFA funds research that impacts US agriculture. So the proposal, when it's written, and that's what our panel is going to look for. So when you write your proposal, make sure that you make clear the relevance of what you're proposing to US agriculture, and so the impacts of your research on US agriculture.
Okay, thank you.
So to speak to your second question, the EEID one, usually the time when a different agency may support a project that sort of wasn't the agency that you intended it to be supported by is an instance where the submission was highly relevant to the program, but the funding agency might have run out of funding. So in the past, sometimes when we have more than highly competitive agricultural submissions than we have funding for, NSF will pick them up, even though they kind of intended it to be a NIFA submission. And I'm kind of thankful that they do that, because then good work that supports our stakeholders gets supported. The best advice I can give you as far as that in EEID is don't just put a cover letter in that says we want NIFA to think about this. It's really to, email me. I mean, you know me, so just like reach out to me. We'll set up a meeting to talk about the project. That way I know that backstory, because there's always a lot of submissions to read, and it's better to have a one-on-one. Go ahead, Mark. Why don't you add on to what I'm saying?
So I agree 100% with what Tim's saying, and it may be more than one agency has an interest in a specific project. Tim faced that recently with a project we thought we were going to fund, and NIH funded it instead. And so that allowed NIFA to fund a different project that wouldn't have gotten funded. So, I wouldn't specify which agency. It's not like they're all getting reviewed by the same panel, And then the different agencies are going to look at the funding, at the proposals, and decide what they want to fund. It's not like NIH, where you're recommending a specific study section at a specific institute, because it's going to get a better review there and more likely to meet that institute's mission. All the different agencies are going to look at these proposals, and they may pick up a proposal. NSF or NIH may pick up a proposal to fund that you or someone else expected it different fund, or vice versa. So
thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. So there's a question in the chat from Haley, and I think the question is, can a submitter submit projects to more than one priority area? Is that, Haley, can you clarify, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like there's kind of there's a couple of options. So I'm just curious if we have an agency and collaborators that are interested in addressing the animal agriculture component versus companion animal versus wildlife, should those be submitted as 3 separate applications, or that's kind of my question. Thanks for allowing me to clarify.
Yeah, so in Afri, there's not really a rule that a single project director can only submit one proposal. So it's usually more beneficial to focus on writing one really good proposal for a program area priority than to submit multiple, like, less fleshed out proposals. But it is possible to do that. There are some people that will submit more than one proposal on different topics. That's a key, is that different topics to the same program area priority. You can also submit different topics to different program area priorities. The only thing that's really problematic is when you submit duplicate submissions. Those are not allowed within Afri. I think I got that right.
That makes sense, and that's really helpful. Just wanting that clarification on if we are interested in addressing a couple of different priorities, is that one application or is that different applications? It sounds like it kind of could go one way or the other, but depending on the priority area, it may be different.
Yeah, I would say, we're going to judge these based on scientific merit. So it's really the submitter's decision whether they want to submit 2 different proposals or make them one thing. They should be cohesive, though, and have, proper objectives if you're going to combine them together. It should make sense as a single unit, rather than just kind of lumping things together for ease. If they're different projects, make them different submissions. Mark, you raised your hand, then you put it down. Do you want to add on?
I put it down because you answered the question. I was going to say, do what makes the most sense. And that's exactly what you said. It should be cohesive and make sense, whether it's going to be combined into one or split out into 2.
And Tim, I do want to add, though, that I think fit for the priority area is another thing that the panel's going to evaluate. So if you're looking at 2 pieces that one fits better under one priority area and one fits better under the other, then you really do need to think seriously about whether you're going to do 2 proposals or concentrate your efforts into doing one really good proposal.
Thank you, Michelle.
That's all really helpful. Thank you.
I have another question.
Go ahead, Doug.
Collaboration, is there a requirement for collaboration?
So, there's no stipulation that a project cannot be, single investigator. If it makes sense and strengthens the work to have other collaborators engaged in the project, then I would just do what's best for accomplishing the goals of the work as you described them. I mean, if it's something that your lab can handle in its entirety and that makes sense, then by all means. If it's better to have other folks, then you should do that.
Good, thank you.
Go ahead, Jürgen.
Yes, thank you. I have a question about the pathogens of interest. And it's mainly, it says a research funding opportunity for SARS-CoV-2, but I understand also other pathogens of interest like African swine fever, Rift Valley, etc., are part of this funding opportunity. Can you please explain or elaborate a little bit on it?
So you're talking about pathogens that are of interest other than SARS-CoV-2. Is that correct? Mark, why don't you start?
Yeah, Jürgen, so we had our standing programs that were announced, disease of agricultural animals, A1211, agricultural biosecurity, A1181, the interdisciplinary engagement in animal systems, A1261, is that right, Angelica? And the EID. So those were already out and announced. And those are the priorities that are listed in the various RFAs. And then APHIS received some funds under the American Rescue Plan to do work on SARS-CoV-2, transmission, diagnostics, and other things in different livestock. So what is already in the RFA covers all those other priorities and other pathogens of interest to NIFA. And then this webinar was to focus on promoting the additional opportunity for SARS-CoV-2, and any work that is funded under ARP through APHIS is going to focus on those priorities, strictly on the SARS-CoV-2 work. And then NIFA would be supporting their regular priorities. So we're just combining the funding mechanisms, or rather than creating a whole separate funding mechanism and a review process, we're taking advantage of one that's existing and already out there.
So when these $24 million will be divided through these 4 different funding opportunities, specifically for SARS-CoV-2.
Right, and then
thank you.
Right, and NIFA has its allocations already set aside for these 4 programs, which is about an equivalent amount, or perhaps even more. I can't remember the exact amounts but NIFA has a separate allocation to cover the other diseases and priorities.
Thank you very much.
So, is there anyone else that has any other questions?
So the maximum budget for the SARS coronavirus is $3 million. Is that correct? Did I hear?
So each program priority area has a different maximum budget. So the $3 million is the EEID program budget. For the others, the best thing to do would be to go and download the Afri Foundational and Applied Science RFA, and then look up either A1221, that's diseases of agricultural animals, A1181, agricultural biosecurity, or A1261. That's ideas, and I can never remember what the acronym stands for, so I'm not gonna get it wrong in front of everyone.
So that's $3 million for 5 years maximum, or?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Thank you, Sierra.
Yeah, and Doug, the link is in the chat. Michelle put that in the chat. So if you want to go there, the link is available.
Thank you.
All right, well, we'll hang out, I think, for a little while in case anyone else has any questions. But at this point, that's kind of all we have for the webinar today. Hopefully we hear from any and all of you that are interested. We'd be happy to sit down and talk.
Well, one other question, is there any restrictions on international collaboration with countries? I assume there's some countries are restricted or not?
Mark would be best to answer that. I believe that there are some that are designated by the department. Mark, do you?
Yeah, so there'll be some that the State Department restricts. You could probably guess some of those nations. There's just relatively few. You know, I'd go to the State Department and website and look at those restrictions. But generally, NIFA supports international collaboration, and we allow subawards to international partners. And there's actually, I believe Tim or Michelle mentioned it earlier, there's actually for some of the programs a partnership collaboration opportunity. And one of the eligible entities to collaborate with is international. That's not for EID, that's for animal, diseases of agricultural animals, I believe is the one that has that.
Thank you.
This is Gary Broganday, and just had a question on accessing this recording and the slide sets.
Yep, the slides and the recording will be available on our NIFA's website, probably within the next week, I would say, to the end of next week.
Okay, thank you very much.
I was trying to locate the application form. I think I'm going to have to go to GPS or some system because, man, I got taken all over the place. There was no road map that I could find that took me there. I still haven't found it, but I haven't given up.
So the submission, if you go to grants.gov and you search for Afri, it should bring up the submission packet and information. I believe the RFA is also listed within there. So that's a place where I would, if I were you, I would search on grants.gov. I think you'll be able to find it.
Okay, thanks.
So just, hi, this is Roman Pogranishny. I have a quick clarification question. You know, for this different agriculture area, A1221, A1261, you know, how are you planning to divide 24 million? Is it each category get 24, or you divided 24 million for each of this?
So from Dr. Hull's presentation, I think they're going to $9 million is dedicated towards the EID. the remaining $15 million is going to be split among the 3 Afri program area priorities. And I think the split among those 3 really depends on the number of submissions that come into each program area and their rank after the panel process is concluded. So I think that's why there's not been like I think that's kind of how it plays out. If anyone from APHIS wants to jump in on that, feel free.
Hi, Tim. Thank you. That's correct. We plan to do up to 9 million for EEID and then split the 15 million amongst the 3 Afri programs based on how things rank.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I think at this point, if there aren't any other questions, we can probably break. And if folks come up with anything else, they can, once the recordings are available, or they can search the NIFA website and reach out to us directly, and then we can set up times to talk with people or email, answer via email. How does everyone feel about that?
Tim, can the NIFA people stay on